good number of attendees that we were expecting.
Yep.
We're a few minutes past the start point, so.
I think we can start.
All right.
All right. Well, welcome to the VIA Professional Group Virtual Marketing Series webinar. I'm Jeff Bevington, and this is Nancy O'Leary, and we're from Custom Direct. Before we get started, a couple things. I'd really like to thank Kathy, Trish, and Sue from VIA for allowing us to be a part of this series and to make this presentation for you. This series is presented in partnership with the Batavia Chamber of Commerce, and specifically, the marketing program partner is BEI Properties. The subject of today's Zoominar or webinar or Zoomcast, whatever you prefer to call it, is digital marketing. So we're going to talk about how you can make it easy for customers to both find you and to do business with you. And doing that's an ongoing process, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Often the hardest part about doing that is just figuring out where and how to start. So the Marketing Quick Start program is something that we put together as subject of the webinar today. It talks about 4 different areas to help you get started improving your marketing efforts today. Why Marketing Quick Start, you might ask? Because the world has moved online. The McKinsey report that came out yesterday talks about the fact that B2B buyers and sellers prefer the new digital reality. As a matter of fact, there have been a lot of different surveys that have been taken, and what it basically says is even after lockdowns have been lifted, people actually prefer doing business online, both buying and selling. And I'm sure most of the people that are seeing this webinar right now are nodding their heads in agreement somewhat. Obviously, things have changed. It's hard to get in, if not impossible, to see a customer. It's really difficult to have people come to you for plant tours. So what are you going to do? Well, all of this has been an outgrowth of our talking to customers and prospects over the last 7 months, telling us that they've got difficulties doing business the way they used to, face-to-face, or some combination thereof. And what do they do now? And basically, the biggest part is, how do they get started? So this new digital reality leads us to a couple of different things. It heightens the importance of, among other things, you have to have a website that works for you 24/7. You have to have digital tools that support your efforts and those of your sales team. That includes Zoom, WebEx, Teams, things like that. And you have to have places and methods to network, like the VIA. You need to be able to meet people. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Nancy O'Leary, who's going to get us started on the Marketing Quick Start Guide.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks for joining us today. Really, we know that your time is really valuable, and we hope that you find this webinar to be a useful tool. What we've put together is really a blueprint for you, and it's a blueprint that provides a solid marketing foundation for your company. Like Jeff mentioned, there's really 4 key components to what we call our Marketing Quick Start. And those 4 areas, as Jeff kind of has alluded to, are really, really critical, not just to your digital presence, but also just for your marketing efforts as a whole. Those 4 areas are your website and keyword analysis, your customer insight interviews, website messaging, and LinkedIn optimization. I know I just ran through those really quickly. Not to worry, Trish is going to be sending out a link after the presentation that'll have not only the webinar video, but it's also going to have a downloadable document. It's actually our Marketing Quick Start user guide, and it'll have all the details of what we're talking about this morning in it.
Right, and because what we're trying to do here is share with you the insight that we've gathered from our customers and prospects so that you can get started yourself.
At any point during the webinar, please feel free to jump onto the Q&A portion of this webinar to put any questions out. We'll be answering questions at the end, but feel free to populate them as we go through any of the topics and a thought comes to mind. So without further ado, and because we are calling this a Marketing Quick Start, we're going to jump right in, and we're going to bring Ryan in to talk about website and keyword analysis. I'm really sorry, I just have to say this. I knew I was going to flub his name. Ryan is going to come in and talk to us right now. Thanks.
Good morning, Ryan.
Hey, how you doing, Jeff?
Good, good. So Ryan is going to talk to us, as Nancy said, about website, keyword, and analysis. So one of the first questions I have for you is, how do search engines work, especially now?
Yeah, so search engines have kind of shifted their focus about 5-6 years ago. They weren't as efficient as they are now. now they're really, really good at delivering the right content to their user.
Mhm.
And a mistake that a lot of people make is that they think that the websites are their users, but the users are actually the people that are using the search engine to look for things. So if you're going to Google and you're typing something in, you're actually the user.
Okay. Can you give me a simple real world example of that?
Yeah, so let's say that I'm looking for new running shoes. If I type in best running shoes, which is a keyword, that would be my search, obviously, into Google. Google wants to produce content that would be relevant to that. And about 10 years ago, you might see Nike, Adidas, the really big brands that had a lot of online power as your very first results. But that's not what you searched for. If you wanted to look at Nike running shoes, you would have typed in Nike running shoes. You wanted some way to look at what's the best kind of running shoes, whether it's reviews or some kind of blog content about that. And that's kind of what they deliver at the top now. So obviously typing in running shoes versus best running shoes will produce a little bit of a different result. And Google's just gotten better at delivering that.
And I can even type in something like, what are the best running shoes for people with bad knees?
Sure. And that's going to be, that kind of gets us into keywords. A keyword is not just one word, it's usually a phrase, and they can be short tail or long. And the difference in that would be obviously running shoes versus where can I buy running shoes in Roselle, Illinois? And obviously running shoes has a lot of different meanings, which also means that it's going to apply to a lot of different things. So there will be a lot more searches for that, but there will also be a lot more competition for that. Whereas where do I buy shoes in Roselle, Illinois is going to be a lot more, that's a long tail keyword, and that's going to be a lot more specific, but it also has a lot better content related specifically to if you are, for example, a store that sells shoes in Roselle, Illinois.
So these keywords, they can be one word like shoes or running shoes, or long phrases like where can I find the best running shoes in Roselle, but all those things. So I don't want to get confused on the keywords short and long. How do I basically get started if I want to do this myself?
Right. So a really good way to get started is that you're going to want to look at how you describe your capabilities, how you describe to your customers what it is that you do. So you're going to want to look at not only your website, but also the kind of other material you might have, your sales pitches, things like that. And you're going to want to take the words that you use to describe what it is that you do, and you're going to want to find a way to compare those with how people are searching on Google.
Well, how the heck do I do that?
Right. So there are a couple paid options that you can use, something like Raven Tools or Ahrefs. But Google actually offers a free keyword planner to anyone that has a Google Ads account. And that doesn't mean that you need to run Google Ads. You just need to set up an account, and then it's free for you to use. And what you can do in that account, which we put into our Marketing Quick Start Guide, you can actually go in there, you can plug in your website. Google will make recommendations of keywords from your actual website, or you can plug in those keywords that you kind of found while looking at your capabilities, and you will see how frequently they're searched, how much competition there is from an advertising standpoint, which is useful to know how much competition it is for the content that you're trying to put out there, as well as other keywords that might be valuable. So you might call something one thing and realize that that's not what people are calling it online. That's not what people are searching for. And that's a really eye-opening experience, and maybe you can change your capabilities to reflect that.
So I'm using these tools, whether it's Ahrefs or Raven Tools, or probably I'm going to use Google Keyword Planner. So I go in there and I do what you were talking about, which is I enter some keywords, I enter some things that I think are important that customers should know about us. And then I get this report. Then I start to make changes. Does Google Keyword Planner give me any insight into what kind of changes I might need to make?
So it'll give you some insight into what keywords you might want to focus on. And it's pretty helpful too, because you can see the different type of keywords. Something might be directly related to your bread and butter, what it is that you sell every single day. And obviously you want to focus on that and put that on your capabilities page. But it might also give you some tangibly related things that you are a subject matter expert in that might not be the very forefront of what you do, but you might be able to provide valuable information. And these are great things for you to plan blogs or newsletters around, as you can provide useful content to Google users, which is the best way to rank.
Okay. Like, for example, if I was writing about the best running shoes, I would talk about why they're the best running shoes. or,
Sure, or give
instruction and all the rest of that.
yeah, or give some examples of the best running shoes in 2020, like maybe some reviews,
Mhm.
which might be really good content for like a overall site about running in general that has a
Yep.
lot of other things.
So I'm doing this, I'm spending some time, and then I start to maybe modify my keywords following the instructions and the plan. How quickly can I see results from this?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not something that happens overnight. It will take months for you to see results. We typically recommend monitoring on a monthly basis
Mhm.
and kind of giving at least 6 months for you to kind of look month over month how you're doing. Um, Typically, this looks at you would typically want to look at after you've made the changes, some kind of keyword ranking for your website, as well as Google Analytics to see where your traffic, how much traffic you're getting, specifically organic traffic,
Mhm.
to see if you are increasing an uptick in traffic from your website.
Okay, so it's going to take me 3 months to maybe start seeing something, and 6 months to really start understanding whether or not the changes I've made, meaning my keywords, my content, things I'm putting on my site so that people can find us. If it takes that long, should I really do it, or should I start with some other steps, or why even do it?
I believe that one of the most important steps is this website and keyword analysis because it's not just about ranking ahead. It's making sure that you don't get left behind. If you do something, there are some tricks that you can employ to
Mhm.
kind of get up to the top of Google search results in the short term, but these are literal tricks. They're tricking Google and it finds that out and it usually applies penalties to your website that are very hard to come back from. So you want to make sure that you do this the right way to make sure that you aren't penalized in the long run.
Okay.
And if you don't focus on it now, you can be left behind by websites that are focusing on it. And it's also hard to come back from being irrelevant on Google.
Yeah, and I think that what we can see by reading the press and just experiencing in our own lives is that more and more people are dedicating and putting some effort and emphasis behind their digital presence. So, like Ryan said, if you don't do it now, you're not only going to miss out, but you might be left behind, and it'll be very difficult for you to come back. So, let me end this particular segment by asking Ryan a question. There's a lot of jargon that goes out there when you talk about SEO, or search engine optimization, keywords, long tail, which is basically means a whole sentence, but you had to come up with jargon for that. So the question I have is, if you were asked to explain this job to your grandmother, can you easily answer the question, what do you do?
Yeah, so I take the approach that my job is to help our customers be found online so that people can easily access them through search engines and to improve upon that and to provide data to back up how they're doing.
Great. Thank you very much, Ryan.
All right, thanks for having me, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Hello again. Thanks,
Hi.
Ryan. Thanks very much. All right, now that we've learned quite a bit more about really how to get your company found online, let's talk about that next portion of our Marketing Quick Start, which is the customer insight interview. Jeff, could you just explain a bit about really what are customer insight interviews and why we should even do them?
Well, for the Marketing Quick Start Guide, we're calling this the Customer Insight Interview. When you do this interview or these interviews, you're developing something that is often referred to as a buyer persona. But again, that's just jargon. So we're trying to keep this easy and light. And basically, the customer insight interviews start with asking questions that in a process that help you learn what matters to your customers logically and emotionally. And we hear directly from these customers, and we hear from somebody who does or doesn't want to do business with you anymore.
So who should we think about reaching out to then for these interviews?
Well, you want to identify 3 or 4 different types of customers. Obviously, a good long-time customer. Sometimes it's somebody you think is a good long-time customer, but you will identify that person. A relatively new customer. If you can, try to interview somebody who is no longer a customer. More often than not, the easiest way to get a hold of that person would be to identify someone who's been working with you a lot and for whatever reasons, maybe reasons you know or don't know, has stopped working with you. And you can find there's a lot of tremendous information you can glean from that interview in particular.
Okay, so you've mentioned that there's maybe 3 or 4 different types of customers. How many total customers then are we talking about that someone should plan to talk to?
Well, for your marketing quick start, we think you should talk to maybe 4 customers, 4 or 5 total. If you were undergoing a larger project and you were going to create really in-depth buyer personas, we think you should talk to maybe about 10 or 12. No more than that, because there's a point of diminishing returns. After you start talking to these people and reviewing the transcripts, because you record the interviews, you find that a lot of the same commonalities come out.
Okay, so I suppose my next question would be then, what are the questions? What are you talking to your customers about? What are you asking them?
Well, somebody's asked me that before, and I used to say there's only one question. There are really 6 different questions, but you start the conversation out after you do your pleasantries and the like, and you say, look, can you take me back to the time when you first began working with my company, or when you or your company first began working with my company? That's a great starter question, and it gets the person talking. Even if they weren't there when they first began working with your company, what you get to is when they, as an individual, first started in their position working with your company. And then there are 5 other types of questions that you want to dig at. And depending upon your industry, they may change just a bit, but there are 5 things that you're trying to understand.
Okay, so it sounds an awful lot like there's a process here. It's not a matter of picking up the phone and calling 3 or 4 or 5 of your existing customers. You're actually putting some thought into it, planning some things out. Could you just walk us through what that process looks like?
Sure. First thing you want to do, obviously, we talked about is identify the types of customers. And then you'll work with your management and sales team to say, well, why don't we try this person? And if you want to get 4 people interviewed, you're probably going to have to reach out to 16 or 20. So, and then you're going to sit down and create your questions. Those would be what the Buyer Persona Institute calls the 5 rings of buying insight. That's more crazy jargon, but basically you're asking questions, and we have help for this, that get you to priority initiatives. For example, what is it that motivates somebody to start thinking about giving you a job or asking you to submit an RFQ? Success factors beyond it's delivered on time with great quality and price. What are the real success factors? What is it that beyond logic, emotionally works for the customer? Perceived barriers, that's a big one. Why is it that a customer may or may not do business with you? Maybe they do business with you, but they don't do nearly as much as they could because, well, you don't know the reason, but you're going to find out. For example, we had a customer who is finding out that everyone loves their work, but they're not going to get a lot of the work because the cost of freight. And if they were to have resources and facilities in other locations, say on the East or West Coast versus here in the Midwest, they would get a tremendous amount more business. Now, just asking and answering that question doesn't mean that they're going to go and buy another company or open an outpost, but it's insightful. And that's one of the things you get when you talk about perceived barriers.
Do you find out or ask questions about the decision process, what leads folks through deciding who they're going to do business with, who they're going to source?
Sure. I mean, very often you might be working with a single person, a buyer, but you know that in a B2B environment, the decision-making process usually includes any number of different people. Depending upon how much the job is or the project costs, you exponentially get more people involved in the process. So even if it's working with a purchasing agent, you want to find out what input do they get from the specifying engineers? What information do they get from their management? And how do they make the decision to decide whether or not they're going to go with you or somebody else?
So you've asked all these questions and now you've got these answers. And I think you had mentioned to get transcripts, make sure that the customers that you're talking to, you've recorded those conversations. I would think that just enables you to have a free conversation and not worry too much about taking notes because you know all of it's being transcribed and you can go back and look at it later.
Yeah.
But then really, what do you do then with all that information? So let's say you've got 5 really significant interviews. You've got some great information in there. What do you do with that information?
Well, if you've actually had a free-form conversation, which is something you can do just by having those 5 or 6 questions in front of you, read them, ask them, and then let the person answer. Since it's all recorded and you've got a transcript, after the fact, you look at these transcripts and you identify, okay, I asked a question about, let's see, perceived barriers. Oh, I can color code it with yellow and a marker, but you gather all this information and you find, well, this person said this about this subject, this person said that. And basically, because you have a transcript, you can take their actual words. There is a process, of course, to develop the report that you're going to present to management, and that process is available for you to download.
So I hate to use jargon, but this sounds a lot to me kind of like a buyer's journey then, in terms of understanding your customer's process.
Yeah.
Would that be accurate?
Yeah, and that's one of the fifth and last question that you want to ask people is basically, what do they do to find resources? And as we know, the digital presence is where everybody's at. But what you're asking is a little more than that. What do you research? What emails do you get? What magazines do you read? What associations do you belong to? How do you network with others to find information about the problems and or resources that you're looking to solve? So that's the buyer's journey, and you're going to find out, well, gosh, everybody is online, or everybody goes to VIA meetings, virtual meetings, and then networks after the fact so they can find a resource. Whatever that is, if you find that your customers are in place A, you'll want to be there too.
That sounds great. Is there any other advice, tips, tricks that you could provide, things that folks might commonly miss if they're taking this on themselves?
Basically, it's lack of preparation. And we talk about this being a free-form conversation. It really is something that you plan for. You write out your 5 questions relative to specifically, your industry, and then just get a hold of the person. There's a process for that too. That's probably the most difficult, is just scheduling the interview. Get a hold of them, have the interview, and then work through it. So if you're going to miss anything, it's the desire to pick up the phone and start talking to somebody right away. And if you follow the process, you'll be amazed actually at the information you get.
So if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like this might be another thing that you really just want to get started with your planning.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. You want to do that. And so what do you do with this afterwards, I guess? You take the information that you've been working on, that Ryan suggested, which is taking a look at your keywords and finding out what is it that's important to people and search engines when they're trying to find something for you. And then you take this customer insight interview, which tells you in your customer's own words what it really does and doesn't matter. And then you help create your messaging. So you are adding to your digital presence. And right now, more than ever, we know that that's extremely important. So on the next subject of Marketing Quick Start is website messaging. And for that, we have Nancy.
And Jeff's going to be asking me some questions if you're following along. So
Yeah.
Jeff, you did a great job of explaining how we're going to take some of that information that Ryan's provided in terms of keywords and finding out how folks are finding you online. And then you should really take the information that you've gleaned from these interviews. And as Jeff mentioned, it's really, informative and sometimes very surprising, the types of information that you can get from your customers just by asking some really fundamental questions in terms of why they're doing business with you, or how they ever came to the process of doing business with you. And the reason that that's really important to do when you're taking a look at what your website messaging looks like is you really want to understand why customers chose to reach out to you to do business. And I know that sounds redundant, but really that's the key to your messaging on your website as well as on social media, so that prospects, when they're visiting your digital presence, have that same reaction, that they also want to work with you. And what better way to find out what really resonates than talking to the folks that are already working with you?
Right. Well, you talk about website messaging, and I can tell you that I've heard people say, we just redid our website. Do we have to do it over again?
Okay. So the great news is you might not have to be perfectly honest. If part of your process when you rebuilt your website included really looking at your keywords, both those regular keywords as well as those long tail keywords. And if you took the time to talk with some of your existing customers to find out a bit more about that process, that buyer's journey that they had in making the decision to work with you. And if you've incorporated that type of messaging, those words, maybe even images into your website, then you probably are in good shape, but it's not a bad idea to just double check some really key areas on your website.
Okay. What key areas are those, or pages? I mean, is it pages?
Jeff, I'm glad you asked. There's key areas and there's pages. The three key pages to your website, and really this holds true whether your website has 4 or 5 pages or 15 or even more. That would be your home page, it would be your capabilities page, and your about page.
Mm-hmm.
So your home page. If you want to think about your home page as really the curb appeal of your house, when folks pull up, what do they see right away? Is it friendly? Can they immediately understand the address? Do they know just a little bit more perhaps about your personality by the colors that you chose or the landscaping that you have? So too with your homepage. We really recommend that you make sure that when folks land on your homepage on your website, first thing they see is your name, that it's very clear, that your logo is very obvious. That branding is critically important when it comes to your digital presence. There's a great opportunity to be very creative on your website, and the homepage, especially that first portion that you see, is an opportunity to show a little bit of that creativity, but just make sure that you're not overwhelming folks and that they can't find that key information right off the bat. Beyond that, navigation on your homepage. It's critical that when folks land on your website, they can easily find where your capabilities page is. Your capabilities page, to be perfectly honest, is probably the single most important portion of your website. It's where you are showing what the products and services are that your company provides. And again, pulling in those keywords that Ryan talked about, as well as the messaging from those interviews. It's so important to make sure that the information that's there is understandable for someone that's visiting your website, but also for Google to find it. When Google's crawling your website so that they can populate you with the right spot, hopefully as high as humanly possible in a search result, it comes down to what's on your capabilities page. So that means that everything within your capabilities page should be clear, easy to follow, and accurate. This really takes us to this concept that your web page should be almost like a living, breathing presence. Your capabilities probably change, especially now more than ever. Perhaps you've moved into some areas that you weren't previously doing. Have you updated your website? Does your website show that? Does your website have all that detail? Images on your capabilities page. They are a wonderful, wonderful part of a page. People love to look at pictures. Really, we'd recommend make sure that those images are optimized. Make sure that they're the right size, that they're not too big. Something that gets easily overlooked in our excitement to load images on websites is that they're not sized right. And if your image is way too big, it actually affects the load time to your website. So for any of us that have been searching online and you're waiting for a website to post and to show up, more often than not, you've got some problems going on with the images that are trying to populate.
I don't know who waits for a website to show up.
That's a good point. They might not,
And
or
the
if they're
next
too
thing.
small, or if the images are too small, that's really discouraging.
Yeah.
So especially in the manufacturing arena, some of your images probably have quite a bit of detail. And so you want to make sure that those pictures show that detail and that are relevant to the copy that they're near. If you've got charts, for instance, that have specifications on them, make sure those are up to date and accurate. And if they're saved as an image, again, it's very important that Google be able to crawl that. So you might want to consider maybe not having them as an image and maybe instead having them as a table or a chart. Little trips and tricks like that can actually be helpful.
So instead of a picture of specifications, it's actual specifications that Google can read.
Precisely.
Yeah, and I had a question. So capabilities, so you got a list of everything we do or all the pieces we make or the machines that we have. We see that a lot. And that really does help in some cases define if somebody says we do 5-axis, they better have the type of equipment that can help you do that.
Yes.
But beyond those things, how important is it to actually tell people how you use your capabilities, how you get things done?
Well, to be honest, you can cover some of that information not only on your capabilities page, but on your about page. Your about page is an important part of how folks that are visiting your site or learning more about your company find out not only what you do, but how you do it. It gives them the opportunity to learn a little bit more about your company culture, your company history, and most importantly, your commitment to sustainability. It,
That's important, sustainability.
it really is. We have come in a very short period of time to a point where sustainability is very much on people's minds. And so when folks are doing their research, when they're doing their due diligence to decide who they want to work with, they really do take a very close look, not only at what you do, but how you do it. And that information, more often than not, is found on your About page. And we'd recommend that that's where you keep the information, just from a best business practice standpoint.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Now, if I'm going through all of this and I'm only doing these 3 pages, what might I miss? Is there anything I might miss?
Oh boy, I would say what we see more often than not is on the homepage, it's the logo. Your logo isn't really sized right, or it's not clear what you do. Ask yourself when you land on a website and all it has is their name, or maybe a really cool image, or maybe several images that are moving through that are animated, but it doesn't tell you what they do. That can really just kind of turn you off, and you'll probably just go to the next person on your list. So logos matter, as well as a tagline or a very clear, succinct explanation of what you do right when you land on your homepage. What else do folks miss? Capabilities. I know I already talked about it for a bit. Really can't stress enough. Your capabilities page is so important from not only a crawling standpoint for Google, but just for folks that are coming to your site. Really take that time to go back and look at your capabilities. We'd even recommend, maybe it's something that you look at once a month, once every couple of months, even if you don't feel like there's significant changes in what you're providing in terms of a service or product. You might catch something that you never noticed before, or perhaps you've now expanded your capabilities with a specific machine and no one remembered to go back and actually put that on your website. So It's a great time to go back and just refresh everyone's mind. Here's what we've got on the website. Is all of this still accurate?
And one of the things we probably haven't touched on, but is good because we're always online all the time, is take a look at your competitors. Take a look at people that you think, they might be a competitor, but I don't know. We're so much better than them. I've heard that before. And you find out, wow, look at what they're doing. We're never saying to copy somebody, but we are saying that you should be cognizant of the fact that your competitors either are doing something, and like Ryan said, they're making sure they're not being left behind, or maybe they're not doing something. Maybe it's really stale and stagnant. That, of course, will inform you as to what you might want to do in that regard. So while you're building your own website pages here, rebuilding them, take a look and see if your competitors are doing the same.
Jeff, that's a great point. Messaging. So your messaging on your website is critically important, as well as your messaging throughout your entire digital presence. And the other very important part of our Marketing Quick Start is your social media presence. And we're going to talk specifically about LinkedIn, and we're going to bring Brennan to talk about that.
Great.
Hello.
Welcome.
Is it finally my turn?
It is finally your turn. All right.
Hello, everybody.
We need to
Good
shake.
morning.
Yeah. Okay, so we are on to the final portion of our Marketing Quick Start Guide, and we're going to talk about social media. And I'm sure there are folks right now that are sitting there saying, okay, but you're saying social media, but you're only mentioning LinkedIn. So Brenna, why are we only talking about LinkedIn really this morning?
Well, there's so many social media platforms out there that everyone has heard of, but LinkedIn far and away is the premier social media platform for businesses and for professionals. And when most people think of LinkedIn, they think of the job search, and that's not wrong. That is where LinkedIn started. But it has evolved so much, especially in the last few years. It's where professionals are going to find connections, to find information on their industry, on companies, on individuals, so much so that it's really becoming like a search engine, very similar to a Google.
Really?
Even down to the search terms in the form of a hashtag, which again is something everyone's probably heard of at this point.
So are we talking about a company's LinkedIn profile or the employee's LinkedIn profile?
Both.
Okay.
And if you don't have a company page, you definitely should have one. That's kind of step number one for LinkedIn. It's followed by a close number two with knowing who your admins are. Because for a lot of people who have a company page, it's probably been a while since you've set it up. So know who your administrators are so that you can start being active on your company page. probably with maybe more than one app.
And if we've got a company page and we have no idea who set it up, or we know who set it up and maybe they're no longer with the company, is there a way for us to go back and be able to capture those admin rights again?
Oh, absolutely. LinkedIn has like a vast resource base. They have easy links. You can just go, maybe use some of Ryan's keywords, plug them into Google, and they usually pop right up.
Okay. So what are the most important parts then about, if we're going to talk about the company side first, I suppose, what are the most important parts about a company's profile page then on LinkedIn?
Sure. So other than having one and knowing your admins, it goes back to those elements you were talking about. So starting with a logo, branding starts with logos, and that's true on LinkedIn as well. So company pages with logos that are appropriately sized generate 6 times more traffic than pages without. So when I say appropriately sized, LinkedIn recommends 300 by 300 pixel logos, which we have included in our user guide, so you don't have to write that down. But that's kind of where it starts, is with that logo. And once you have that down, you can move on to your cover image, which LinkedIn recommends a certain pixel size, which we have included. But that goes back to your branding elements.
Okay, and is that bigger picture then that's at the top?
Right, it's that big long one.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's kind of an awkward size.
Yeah, and it runs the length of your LinkedIn company page. But once you get those down, you can move on to your overview section, which includes your About Us. And for all the same reasons that's important on your website, it's important on your company page. It's where you get to talk about what you do and what you do better than anyone else.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and then talk about employees, the employees of your company on LinkedIn. How important is it that employees for your company are not only on LinkedIn, but they identify as an employee of yours and of your company?
Sure, it's key. It's key that your employees are advocates for your company on LinkedIn, and that they're updating their page that way. So, and LinkedIn has evolved to help them do that. So when your employees update their page to include their most recent position with your company, it's key that they do so in a way that can link through to your company LinkedIn page.
Okay, this sounds like you've got a smirk on your face. I'm thinking that there's some tips and tricks that you're going to share with us.
Yes, and it's a much simpler process than it sounds like. And LinkedIn has rolled out some integrations to make it even easier. But it is a common misstep because you know who you work for, so it's easy to just kind of put the name in. But it's key to enter in your company name as it appears on your company page. So if I were to put my most recent position here with Custom Direct, I would put Custom Direct Inc. So the Inc is important because that's how it appears on our company page. But LinkedIn auto-generates that as a drop-down. And I would know that I'm doing it correctly because the Custom Direct logo appears in that drop-down menu.
And if I select something that isn't, or maybe I already had a LinkedIn profile up for a few years and I've worked here for several years, how do I know whether or not I've done this the right way?
Sure. So once you hit save on your recent edit, if you by chance did it incorrectly, well done, it would pop up with a gray box. So your logo would not appear where it should appear. And a good way to test it as well is to try to click through on your company name, and it should click through to your company page. If it doesn't, and it goes maybe to like a news feed, a search feed, like it would on a search engine, and not link right through to your company page, you maybe didn't do it right. So it should link directly through to your company page.
Okay, so a company's got their LinkedIn page. They have their admin credentials ready. They're very excited. They've been watching this webinar and folks are ready to go and really start optimizing their LinkedIn presence.
Right.
What should they be doing from a company perspective for their page?
Well, it starts with posting. I mean, that's like the big way to make an impact on LinkedIn is putting out great, relevant content.
Okay, that sounds really time consuming.
It definitely does not have to be. The keys to success, like I said, relevancy and consistency. And it does not have to be a giant undertaking. It really can start with 2 posts a month, 15 minutes per post. And maybe one post can be an industry relevant post and another could be a company centric post. And what I mean by that is the industry relevant post could be if you're an industrial company who is rolling out some Industry 4.0 integrations, you could go up to that search bar in the top left of LinkedIn and search hashtag automation or hashtag robotics. And you might see an entire news feed of posts that include that topic. So do a little bit of research on those like relevant search terms to you and see kind of where your company fits in as a subject matter expert and generate that type of content.
Okay, so then how do you get people to see these posts then?
So those searchable terms is a great way. You can include hashtags within the captions of your posts. But another key, very important way is that employee advocacy. So engagement, so liking, commenting, and sharing these posts as an employee will expose the post to an entirely new audience. So utilizing and leveraging your individual networks to expose the content is huge.
So that sounds kind of time consuming. How do you let everybody in the company know then that there's been a new post added?
And that's another key integration from LinkedIn to assist companies in putting out great content is the notify employees feature, which can be done every 24 hours with new content. So if I were to create a post, it's in the top right of the new content, so the little content window, and you can hit notify employees, and any employee who is linked to your company will get notified that there is new content out there to engage with.
That sounds like another reason it would probably be a great idea for everybody on your team to maybe take a quick look back at their own LinkedIn profile and make sure that they really are connected to your company. Look for that logo.
Mm-hmm.
So should all the folks within a company then that are on LinkedIn even be connected to each other? That feels kind of redundant.
No, it's just kind of putting that unified front forward, making sure everyone knows you are a team, working together as a team. And again, a big part of LinkedIn is it's a way that people find you as a company. If you're at a trade show, people go to LinkedIn and say, oh, I talked to that person. And then they look on your profile to find your team member, to find another member of your sales team. So being connected is a huge way to leverage LinkedIn.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about posting for a company. What about for employees? What types of things should employees be posting, or where do they even find stuff to post beyond whatever the company is posting and they choose to share it or to comment on it? What about their own organic information? What should that look like?
Sure. So in addition to engaging with company content, it should be a mix. It should be a mix of what's relevant in your industry, because that's a big part of LinkedIn, but it's also what's interesting to you, because your LinkedIn profile should have a touch of your personality in there as well. So again, utilizing the search bar on LinkedIn is huge, and kind of searching things that are interesting to you. Nancy's great at this. I'm always on her LinkedIn profile to see what she's posting, but just finding things that are interesting to you and putting a little bit of your personality in there is a great idea.
How often, you had mentioned like relevancy and then just making sure that you're keeping up and you're consistent with your posting. So for a person, how important, or how often I should say, should somebody be posting on LinkedIn?
It's kind of whatever feels comfortable to you. But it is that consistency, like you're saying. So if you want to start with 15 minutes of just kind of going through your news feed, whatever kind of feels comfortable for you, but just making sure it's consistent helps to establish yourself as a subject matter expert in your industry. So
you're mentioning a news feed. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be information then that's going to be popping up, posts from other people that I'm connected to on LinkedIn. They're going to show up on my homepage when I'm logged into LinkedIn. How should I be reacting to those posts? Should I don't know,
you can engage with anything you find interesting, but LinkedIn as a platform, compared to other social media platforms, is a little bit more buttoned up than the others, and it is a platform for professionals. So engagement is key. Individualized engagement is key. But another way to kind of boost your newsfeed is to follow those hashtags, which we've referred to as searchable terms. But LinkedIn allows you to follow hashtags. So you can increase the information that you find interesting on your newsfeed by going ahead and following those search terms.
Okay, so we said that we were just going to talk about LinkedIn, but maybe we told like a little white lie there. Can you just touch base a little bit on the other social media platforms that are out there and why a company might use them, or what kind of content might go on those platforms?
Sure. So Facebook is a big one, and that's a great platform for kind of mixed content. But a great example would be an employee anniversary or a company picnic, kind of the company culture pieces. And it serves well to post a photo with a caption. But then that's kind of what I mean by mixed content. But really, it's a great opportunity to post about your company culture. And then there's Instagram, which is all about the aesthetic, all about high quality images, because that's what people are going to Instagram for. Not necessarily text content, but all about the images. Then there's Twitter, which is fast paced, low character count, little tidbits of industry relevant content. But Twitter's all about quick engagement. So as people respond to your content, it's very important to respond quickly to them.
Okay, so what about on LinkedIn then? It sounds like if you're posting things on LinkedIn, you're also going to want to be engaged with the engagement to your posts. What's the best way to handle that?
Quickly is the short answer, to quickly engage with those that are engaging with you.
And does LinkedIn have any tools that help with that?
Absolutely. So in addition to the kind of macro overview of the dashboards, analytics dashboards, which is a little bit into it, but they have the page notifications, which just give you a quick overview of, hey, somebody liked your post or commented. So it's good to keep your eye on that. But those analytics dashboards I mentioned were kind of modeled after Google Analytics because there's so much happening on LinkedIn. To really take a look at. So the people who are following your page and when they followed, people who are liking your posts and which content they seem to be geared towards. And it was really modeled after Google Analytics because there's so much more than simple connections happening. Like 80% of B2B lead generation is happening on LinkedIn. So those analytics are becoming increasingly important.
Can you get information about specific people that are actually interacting with your posts, or is it more company-wide or more industry-wide? How specific can you get with that LinkedIn dashboard?
All of that, yeah, it can give you all of that, but the follower information that you mentioned is a new rollout. So that was not something that was made available in the past, but in the last, 4 months, I think, that's something that they've put out there. So it's really helpful for sure.
If there's something that folks tend to overlook or that maybe they miss with their LinkedIn profile, is there anything that kind of comes to mind right off the bat?
So other than the logo, and I'm going to say it again, the logo being right, and the cover image, the branding, I'd say a link to your website. People are going to your LinkedIn page because they want to know more about you. And if they're that interested to know more about you, they probably want to take a look at your website. And so drive traffic to your website, put it in your about section.
That sounds awesome, especially if your website's also been optimized and you're using those great keywords and you're using some of that insight that you've gleaned from those customer interviews. And that really covers all 4 components of this blueprint that we've been talking about, this how to get started quickly with your marketing and make sure that you have a strong marketing foundation. Brenna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Thank you, everybody.
I think Jeff is going to come back in and we're going to take a look at questions. And it looks like we've got a handful of them.
All right. Pull them up here. Okay. So one of the questions is, how do you view who is listed as an employee? And follow up to that is, and how do you update for people who may no longer be an employee? Hey, Brenna?
I'm going to come back in. Hello, everyone. So the first question, how do you see the list of employees? So if you're an administrator on LinkedIn, once you view your page as an administrator, there's a little blue link in the top right of your LinkedIn page. It should be somewhere right below your cover image, that big long image. And it'll say, see all 40 employees of your company, or see all, however many employees you have. And then once you click on that, it'll give you a big long list. But if you're looking as an everyday user of LinkedIn, you can just search by company name, and it should give you a relatively accurate list of employees.
And then what if somebody has left? So if you've got someone that's no longer with the company and they show up on that list, then what steps can you take then?
Well, and this is something we were just looking at the other day. So this kind of goes back to the resources, the LinkedIn resource base that I was talking about a little bit earlier. It's part of their like knowledge base. You can just give it a quick Google search, and you petition to have that information verified by LinkedIn, which sounds like a long process, but it's really just putting in your name, your position with your company as an administrator. And if you're not the administrator for your company page, you do need that administrator to provide their information just to make sure that that petition does go through.
And Brenna mentioned that we were just working on this for a client. It really can take a number of weeks for LinkedIn to work through the whole process. It's just important to get it started and to be patient. There are significant enhancements that have now recently come to maintain that accuracy. So LinkedIn is taking it really seriously. And something that we want to mention is we've enacted the Q&A section. So if you've got any questions for us, the Q&A portion is what we've got active right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not the live chat, but the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody asked a question, is all this again explained after the fact?
And it is. So again, Trish is going to be sending out the link for this webinar. If you've already watched it once or been here and you want to watch it again and again, don't worry, you'll have that opportunity. As well as we've got a downloadable PDF that's a handful of pages long, and it really spells out these 4 key areas that we've been talking about, as well as specific information. Jeff referenced, for instance, the Buyer Persona Institute. Brenna was talking about image sizes and how important those are to get right. And we've included that information in the document. So it really should be your blueprint for success with your digital marketing presence.
Yeah, and we have put this together so that you can get started yourself, and we hope that you do.
And again, the key, just get started. We hope that we've provided you with enough insight and hopefully a comfort level to know that it doesn't have to be a huge challenging problem or just one more thing on your list that you've got to get to. It really is as simple as just getting started. Take those iterative steps. And you know what? Actually reminds me of a point that I wanted to make. Iterative. So this entire process can be done sequentially like we've laid it out in the guide, or you could actually be working on some of these simultaneously, or just iteratively doing small portions of each one when you have time, and then maybe going back and doing just a bit more. Don't feel that you've got to complete the entire website and keyword analysis before you move on to scheduling, say, customer insight interviews. Feel really comfortable with just getting started, understanding perhaps where your digital presence needs the most work, and start there.
So, and just to wrap up, once again, we want to thank the VIA
Absolutely.
group, Kathy, Trish, and Sue for asking us to be a part of this series. I want to thank the Batavia Chamber of Commerce as a presenting partner, and BEI as a sponsor of this particular webinar. And if you've got any questions, I'm sure you can follow up directly with Trish, and she can get those to us. But other than that, thank you very much. Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.
Yep. Take care. Bye.
Bye.